to get started. We have a good hour here to start sinking our teeth into the longevity lifestyle. What the heck is that? We're about to find out. So really quickly, my name is Renee Fitton. I am a registered dietitian and the director of education at El Nutra Prolon. And I am thrilled to be your moderator today. As many of you are familiar, Prolon is the maker of the 5-day fasting mimicking diet. And I know we're all big fans here as a great solution to incorporate that into our annual healthy routine. But for most of us, we're really only doing the 5-day fasting mimicking diet about 15 total days a year. That's about 3 times a year, maybe 4, up to about 6 times a year, depending on who we are. So the inevitable next question is, how else can Prolon and all of the wonderful tools and solutions that we have available support us for the rest of our 350 days a year? So that's what we're going to uncover today. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce a fellow registered dietitian friend of mine, Melanie Murphy, who is an awarded dietitian. She is practicing in the space of integrative and functional nutrition, and no one else could do a better job of introducing her than herself. So please, Melanie, take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'll take it. Thank you, Renee. I'm very excited. So Renee and I actually happen to be not only colleagues from school, but we're also colleagues here at El Nutra and Prolon. I am a registered dietitian as well, master's in health span and longevity. We both studied under Walter Longo for our master's degree program. And I am now the director of communications here at El Nutra, and I help manage, oversee, assist Renee with all medical related education here too. So it's very exciting to be here. And I also, for context, I have been a practicing dietitian for the last 6 years, and I specialize in gut health and really focusing on getting to the root cause of people's gut related issues and the symptoms related to gut related issues like anxiety, depression, autoimmune conditions. And one huge component to my practice that I've always integrated has been El Nutra and El Nutra products for reasons that we're going to go into today. So I'm really happy to be both on the inside and the outside and to be able to share my experiences from both.
Beautiful. Well, we are very grateful to have you here today. And so let's go ahead and dig right on in. I want to start first with talking a little bit about Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet, which I think everybody here, I think it's safe to say that we're big fans of that. And what I especially love about the 5-day FMD is that all of the research that has been done with it has been done without making any other nutrition changes. So you're just taking the 5-day FMD. And so to me, sometimes when I think about, okay, look at all these great weight loss, bio-age reversals, improvements in metabolic health that come from the fasting mimicking diet alone, I wonder, okay, do we need to make any other dietary or lifestyle changes outside of that if we're already getting incredible benefit by doing this a few times a year? So can you unpack that for us?
It is a lot to unpack, isn't it? So if the very cool part about the 5-day FMD and the way that the Walter actually designed it was so that there is very minimal need for complete lifestyle changes in between 5-day fasts. And what the studies are the research that we have available to us now is showing us that once you do your 3-month onboarding period, which I'll just repeat right now in case anyone's new to the program, but if you've never done Prolon 5-day before, the first recommendation of it is to follow it for 1 cycle a month for 3 consecutive months to begin. And then after that, it's 3 times a year to maintain your longevity benefits. And that's for a generally average a health person. Obviously, there's changes and differences depending on the specificities of your specific health paradigm. But if we look at people that follow the 5-day FMD for those 3 initial cycles and then come back and they haven't touched anything, haven't touched a 5-day for 6 months, when we follow up with them again, we found that their benefits they receive from that initial span of time actually was about 65% of retention of those benefits, such as weight loss, such as cardiometabolic benefits. So that's pretty impressive that you don't have to do that much in addition to the 5-day FMD, the way that the protocols were developed, in order to see a lot of the same benefits. But obviously that we do need to continue to do the 5-day. It's supposed to be part of it. The benefits are supposed to compound after over a period of time. But that's not to say that you can't make massive changes in between the 5-day prolonged fast, which is why you should be looking at not only the yearly longevity cycle with prolonged 5-day, which is, I like to say, that's where it all begins. It's not where it ends, it's where it all begins. And then you can start dwindling down to, what can I do from a weekly and daily perspective to enhance those longevity benefits, to make my 5-day FMD results really, really compound at an exponential rate. So that's kind of what we're looking at today, is that in between the 5-day fast. But it is important to note that even if the only shift that you made was the prolonged 5-day fast, which I think is still a decently big lift on the longevity front, you're still going to be seeing some incredible benefits.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I mean, why not do a little bit more just to get an additional boost and maximize your health benefits? I don't think anybody would deny that. So it's great that we get great benefit from our 5 days a few times a year. But what else can we do? So let's explore that. You know, we talk a lot about the Longevity Diet book by Dr. Walter Longo. If anybody hasn't read it yet, it is available on Amazon, pretty much anywhere you get your books. I would strongly recommend reading it. But when we look at the principles of the longevity lifestyle and the Longevity Diet book, can you share a little bit about those pillars that make up some of the recommendations?
Sure. So Dr. Longo, Walter puts this, details it out into a couple different sectors. So within the longevity lifestyle parameters that he's put together, one pillar of it is intermittent fasting. So I do want to take a quick brief second, because we get this question all the time, that people confuse the prolonged 5-day fast with an intermittent fast. It's actually a prolonged fast. Anything over 3 days is considered a prolonged fast. So prolonged 5-day is in its own category. It's a prolonged fast. It is not considered an intermittent fast. But intermittent fasting are things you can do anything under 48 hours. So that could look like time restricted feeding, which I think most people are following when they say they're following intermittent fast, or following a time restricted eating pattern. And that means that within a 24-hour period of time, you're deciding which times of the day you're not eating food and which times of the day you are eating food, to maximize things like weight loss, energy levels, things like that. But also you could potentially do an intermittent fast for a whole day or even 2 days and still be considered an intermittent fast, which we have products within that line too that help support people that want to follow a 5-2 pattern or a 6-1 pattern or something like that. But intermittent fasting is a part of the longevity diet lifestyle pillars that Walter puts together. And specifically, he talks about the 12-12 pattern. And that's where I kind of want to hone in on my attention, and we can have a little bit more of a dialogue, because I know lots of people have tons of questions about this. But he talks about the 12-12 pattern as being the most beneficial for longevity. And the reason for this is because in 12-12, meaning if you had your first bite of food at 8 a.m. and your last bite of food at 8 p.m., that would be a 12-12 pattern. And then you would fast from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. As an example. And a lot of people are like, whoa, like with the advent of 16-10 or 16-8 and 14-10, people are like, that feels like a really long time to eat. The reason this is really important from a longevity perspective is that the 12-12 pattern allows you to eat breakfast first thing in the morning. And I think that is a really, really critical component that people are missing when they are time restricted eating, because we need breakfast. We need to break our fast first thing in the morning. We need to follow circadian eating patterns, which is another thing that he outlines in his book, which support things like hormonal synthesis, energy levels, digestive health, in terms of getting your digestive juices flowing and moving first thing in the morning. So it's really, really important to consider a 12-12 pattern. And tell me, I want to lob this back into your direction, Renee, so you can contribute to this. But a lot of people think one of the first questions we get is like, well, I'm trying to lose weight, and that's way too long a period of time to lose weight. you still can calorically restrict, and he explains this in his book as well, but you still can calorically restrict within the 12-12 circadian pattern by simply not having all 3 meals within that time, but you could have breakfast.
Oh, sorry, Melanie, looks like we're muted here.
That's okay. I got a notification too.
Yeah.
What did you miss anything? Hopefully not.
We can just jump right back in. Why not?
Yeah, cool. You still can calorically restrict within a 12-12 pattern by just reducing the amount of meals that you have. So a lot of people in my practice, I will tell people if weight loss is a goal for, and that is why you're time restricted eating or following an intermittent fast, then you should eat breakfast first thing in the morning. That should be really, truly your most nutrient dense meal of the day. You can go ahead and bypass lunch and have a snack instead, a handful of nuts, some fruit, something smaller for lunch, and then have a decently, nutritious dinner, so long as you're finishing within that 12-12 pattern. And that will still benefit you from a weight loss perspective and a metabolic perspective, as would restricting from a 12 or, a 16-8 or a 14-10. So I'm going to just stop right there because that's a lot to unpack and people have lots of feelings about it. So I want to give you a time and a second, Renee, to give your thoughts on the 12-12 and intermittent fasting.
Absolutely. Well, we did get some questions coming in as we were unpacking this intermittent fasting and time restricted eating pillar of the longevity diet. So let's look into these a little bit more deeply. We got an anonymous attendee who asked, regarding time restricted eating, the time when I get hungry and I want to eat is late in the evening before bed. So how do I cope with this to eliminate those feelings of hunger? So I love this question because especially when you brought up the importance of breakfast and how important that is to incorporate into our routine. What happens if we do get hungry late in the evening as we're shifting our eating window to eat earlier on the day and stop eating earlier in the evening?
Yes. I'm going to answer this a couple of different ways. I think there's a couple prongs that we need to address. But in terms of, let's just dive into what we have that can help you right away. So from our product line, our longevity product line, we do have the fasting bars and the fasting shakes, which are actually probably, in my opinion, the most underrated products of our product line because you can consume those during a fasting window and it will not break your fast. And they still have a little bit of carbohydrate. They have a decent amount of healthy fats, some plant-based protein. So it does actually help to elongate your fast. So say you're done with dinner and you need something after dinner to kind of quelch that hunger, you could have a fasting bar or fasting shake during that period of time. It will not break your fast, and you can get to that morning breakfast and still have the ketosis benefits that you may be benefiting from, and all of those fasting benefits that you see. So that's a really, really cool immediate tip that you could utilize right away. And it's something that we actually prefer people to do it that way, where they're eating it at night before bed instead of for breakfast, although you can actually have it for breakfast as well and use it in that way. So I'd say we'd start there, but I want to just call out that if you are having, and don't have to go too deep into this, but you should take a look at what you are doing earlier in the day, because there are studies that have pointed to what you're eating for breakfast. If it is a more carbohydrate rich breakfast, things like breads and cereals and oatmeal and things like that could actually make you crave sugar in a bigger way throughout the day and late at night. It could also be related to gut related issues too, that, blood glucose imbalances, things like that are important to consider why that's happening to you. If you're having sugar cravings like that, I usually always think about what's going on in your gut. But in terms of what you can do right away, I love the fasting bar and fasting shake for that.
Okay, beautiful. And I think you kind of answered another one of the questions that was in here, which is the intermittent fasting bar a sufficient breakfast? So you kind of glazed over it. So why don't you just spend a little bit more time on that? And then I have another question coming at you.
Yeah. So it can be used as a breakfast. I know we have a lot of people who, and I would love to hear if you agree with this, Renee, but in my experience with my patients, if you have been following an intermittent fasting schedule where you have been skipping breakfast for a long period of time, you very likely aren't going to crave breakfast. You have trained your body to not need it or not want it or not have, you don't have the same hormonal cortisol uptake first thing in the morning that gets that ghrelin going in your system that makes you hungry, right? So you do kind of have to train your body back into breakfast. And the fasting bar can be one of those things, especially if you're like, I'm a person that rises and shines and goes straight to the gym and I can't work out on a really full stomach. This could be a really wonderful option for you. But the good news is that because it does have quite a bit of healthy fats, a little bit of that glucose from the sugar, and 5 grams more or less of plant-based proteins, it could suffice for a breakfast if you are just not into breakfast. But in my opinion, I think that by training your body and using this as a tool, as you're getting back into that time restricted eating and the 12-12 pattern, if that's something that's of interest to you, it will help to train your body to get there. Do you have anything to add
Beautiful.
there on your side?
No, I think that's great. We have so many great questions coming in. I wanted to dive into another
Like
one.
we
I know I'm
need to go
in there.
Yeah. Good.
So a great question is, the intermittent fasting bar contains 5 grams of sugar. How is it possible that it does not break the fast?
Yeah, great. This is this nutrition technology that is L-Nutriprolon. So our bodies have, we track anyway, 3 primary nutrient sensing pathways. We track IGF-1, we track mTOR, and we track PKA. And each of these nutrient sensing pathways that we track here in our research and within our product line, they are affected by certain macronutrients. So mTOR, for instance, is especially affected by protein. IGF-1 and PKA are especially affected by carbohydrates. What we've been able to study is all of the nutrients are precisely formulated within our products to stay just below the nutrient sensing pathway triggers. Because if we stay just below those triggers, it means that your body will stay in a fast while still being fed. So it is kind of a hard concept. I think a lot of people are, when we say that we're fasting with food, they're like, doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really, and if you don't understand the nutrient sensing pathways and how they work, but our body can accept a certain amount of nutrients, including some sugars, some proteins, some fats, ideally from the right sources though, because not all sources of sugar or proteins or fats are created equal. And we can go into that a little bit if you guys want to, but we can accept a little bit of nutrient before triggering those nutrient sensing pathways on. And when we stay below those nutrient triggers, we are staying in that fasted state, staying in that ketosis state. So that's basically one of the primary pillars of how all of our nutrition technology works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to just jump in with one highlight of one of our recent clinical studies that was done with the fasting bar specifically, showing that it did have no increase in glucose or no drop in ketones compared to water alone, which again, I mean, it again seems too good to be true, but when we look back at the clinical studies, you can see it. I've had a lot of people wearing CGMs eating the fasting bar, and they see no change in their glucose. It's pretty cool to see that it really does work that way. Now, it doesn't. We got a question from Scott asking that he was wearing a CGM when he does the FMD and he notices a spike, and we can kind of talk a little bit more about that as well, and how when we look at those spikes, this is where we point back to the nutrient sensing pathways. And we also point back to some of the benefits of those spikes that are actually supporting our muscle. And I mean, we can really dig into that in a lot of detail, but without derailing too much, I just would like to point back to that study with the fasting bar specifically showing that there was no change in glucose or ketones compared to water. So we're happy. We'll try and throw that in the chat as we go as well. Now, to keep the conversation moving along, I just wanted to ask a couple questions about the difference between time restricted eating styles. So we have 12-12, but a lot of people are asking, okay, what about 16-8 and what about 14? What are the benefits, and are there benefits in extending the fast to 14, 16 hours, and what might be some concerns with that?
Yeah. Some of the benefits that people tout and that they like to talk about is the increased weight loss and the speed at which they lose weight. And this can be, you know, I do want to acknowledge that every person is different, and people do really find, especially with, I would say if I'm going to acknowledge any of them as being another viable option, I would say the 1410 is the safer bet. 16.8 is really inching into potentially dangerous long-term zone in terms of, you know, there have been preliminary studies, mostly because actually it's really the breakfast part. If you wanted to follow a 16.8 and eat breakfast and then end your meals earlier, you're going to be doing it so much differently than people that skip and don't eat until 3 p.m. and then they eat the bulk of their meals from, you know, in the latter half of the day. And that's simply because of the circadian pattern and the way that our bodies naturally rhythm with our organs and our digestive juices and things like that. But a lot of people aren't doing it that way. And I think it's important to note that you can do a 16.8, 14.10 for shorter periods of time. Those are not long-term intermittent fasting solutions. These are short-term weight loss, metabolic solutions that can help you so long as you're doing it the right way. And I think that it's important that the reason people have been hating on it a little bit more these days is because most of us are doing it backwards. And by doing it backwards, by skipping breakfast and not eating in those really critical daylight hours, we are potentially slowing down our metabolism in the long run, potentially causing things like hormonal imbalances, glucose imbalances. So when you look at things like down the line. So in the interim, I would say if you felt compelled to do a stricter intermittent fast from a time restricted eating perspective, consider them as short-term solutions, not long-term solutions. And once you reach your weight goal, go back to the 12-12, go back to the 12-12 and find your rhythm with the 12-12. And also consider, you know, if you are one of those people that are really delaying your food intake to later in the day, see if you can't swap a little bit and see how that changes your energy levels, changes your cardiometabolic markers. I always want to point to, if you have high LDL, if you have high blood pressure, and that's not going away with your intermittent fasting schedule and you're skipping breakfast, swap, do the breakfast, end earlier in the day, see if that helps your markers. It really is something to consider there.
Awesome. So 16, 14-hour fasts, they are doable, ideally for shorter periods of time, not long-term, not forever, especially for people who are looking for additional weight loss. And if you do choose to do them, try and shift the eating window, start eating earlier in on the day and end earlier in the day. Exactly. That's what I'm hearing, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Perfect.
And
okay.
You can use the fasting bar fasting shake in that timeline too, if you wanted to. If you're like, hey, I really do want to do 14-10, you can utilize the fasting bar fasting shake during your fasting windows.
Great. And you know what? I was going to transition, but I see a great question from Karen asking, is this product all about losing weight? And I'm assuming she's talking about the fasting bars and fasting shakes. And I'll just jump in and say, no, there's a lot more to it than that. And especially when we look at the ability of our body to burn fat for fuel, yes, that can result in weight loss, but it can be a lot of other wonderful benefits that come from that too. When we don't see these spikes in glucose, it has really healthy metabolic benefits to our whole system. Having high blood sugar, especially long-term, can wreak havoc on our bodies. And so by taking these steps and having healthy snacks, even if you're not using it for fasting, even if you're not using it for weight loss, it is a really great addition. So thank you, Karen, for that question. All right, so let's talk about some other pillars of the longevity diet and longevity lifestyle. Let's talk a little bit about the different macronutrient composition of the program. I'd like to start with protein because it is the most, everybody's got something to say about protein. So can you talk a little bit about let's talk a little bit how you would recommend somebody balance protein as part of their longevity diet outside of the Prolon 5-day.
Yeah. So within the longevity diet and the longevity lifestyle that we tout here and we truly will hang our hats on from the science that we have, is we are promoting a mostly plant-based diet. And that means mostly proteins, carbohydrates, fats from plant-based foods. So things like legumes, lentils, beans, nuts and seeds, things like this. And that's because the research that we found from looking at longevity zones, looking at centenarians, people who live well past 100, they are and they have been eating a mostly plant-based food diet. And plant-based foods come with all sorts of ancillary benefits, including phytonutrients, antioxidants, fiber, which is sorely missing in our Western diets. So we really do tout a plant-based diet. And I want to pause here because you mentioned protein. One also critical component to the Western diet that is contributing quite in a very large way to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity is the excessive consumption of animal meats. And I hate saying that to people as it breaks people's hearts, but we are eating too much animal proteins. And the reason this is a problem is because when we eat a lot of animal proteins, it excessively triggers the mTOR and IGF-1 pathways. Two of those nutrient sensing pathways we talked about before. And when those are excessively triggered, it actually accelerates cellular aging. So our cells will age faster. That being said, and not getting enough protein is also going to accelerate the aging process, because protein is critical for almost every single process in our body. We need proteins to produce hormones. We need proteins to repair our muscles. We need proteins for everything, for creating neurotransmitters. We need it all. So getting not enough is also a problem. So we want to find this sweet balance between getting enough protein, but not getting too much. And one way that you can do that is incorporating more plant-based sources of proteins, because plant-based sources of proteins, like legumes, lentils, beans, nuts, and seeds, will not excessively trigger either mTOR or IGF-1 to the degree that animal-based proteins do. And again, that's because of the fiber. It's because of the way that the nutrients synergistically work together. So we do talk about plant-based proteins and plant-based lifestyle quite a bit, especially from the protein side. And one product I'll mention here is our L protein, our longevity protein that we launched earlier this year, which is made entirely from beans and legumes, black beans, chickpeas, and peas, and has a variety of other ancillary nutrients to help with bioavailability and digestibility. But we have a study that's going to come out here, hopefully in the near future, that basically suggests that it really is keeping you at the bottom of the bell curve. It's not excessively triggering up here like animal-based proteins do. It's giving you enough to repair your muscles, to really support your body, but it's right here at the bottom of the bell curve to give you just enough protein, or just enough of that protein replenishment to keep your aging in check.
Awesome. I'm getting some great questions about how to leverage the L protein or any protein really when for specific individuals. So who would especially benefit from the L protein or adding this into their daily routine?
Everybody. I would say it depends on, first of all, if you're vegan vegetarian already, the L protein is incredible, because I don't want to blanket statement vegans and vegetarians, because there's some incredibly nutritious, nutrient dense vegans, vegetarians out there, but they do tend to be lower in protein than, say, people who do eat animal proteins. But so you can use that if you're already vegan vegetarian to increase your protein intake from a plant-based perspective to really support you. But I actually really like the L protein for my meat eaters and my animal-based protein eaters, because just by swapping out once a day your L protein for an animal-based source of protein, you'd be doing marvels for your cells in the long run in terms of the aging process. So I really like L protein for meat eaters that way, to really mitigate some of those negative side effects of having too much animal protein in your diet.
I like that a lot. I'm jumping back to a question by Janet, who asks about why the longevity diet is so low in protein. And, she asks, especially for the older population where she's aware that protein needs do increase. So that's, I think, is a nice little segue into another group that I think is especially going to benefit from something like the L protein and plant-based sources of protein, which is the older population or individuals over 65. So do you want to touch a little bit more on that?
That was my also a second ago. It's like also, yes, that's exactly right. So when we're talking about low protein, and this isn't no protein, guys. We do not, we're not touting no protein. Their protein is a necessary requirement in the longevity life. But when you are under 18, when you're growing in bones and brains and you're getting taller and going through puberty and all those things, and then again when you're over 65, you need higher levels of protein. So there's two sides of the coin. When you're really young and when you're aging past 65, you do have higher protein needs. And on the 65 and up scale, it's because research is showing that higher amounts of muscle on older individuals is actually linked to longer lives, right? And we need that lean body mass to ensure that we live a long time, because if you have lower muscle mass or muscle stores in your body, it is linked to faster aging over 65. So you do have to change your protein requirements depending on where you are in your life cycle and what you're doing within that life cycle. So 65, the over 65 population is an incredible population to utilize the L protein as well for that very reason, to increase their protein synthesis, because over 65, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, you're, instead of 0.8 grams per kilogram, which is what we meet between the 18 and 65 category, which is what people consider low protein, you're looking at more like 1 to 1.2 over 6.5, or over the age of 65, you're aiming for 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
Yeah, important, per kilogram.
Per kilogram, not per pound.
American. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. No, that's super helpful. And I'm glad that we touched on that, because I can tell from the questions we have a lot of people joining here that are over 65. And so we'll try and touch on a little bit more of that for this audience as we get through the webinar today, because we want to make sure that we are tailoring this to our audience. So please do keep sending in your questions. Now, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about healthy fats. And I mean, healthy fats, I think, is another space that has been garnering a lot of attention, especially like with the seed oils debates and all of the things that are going on around fat and healthy fats. So can you talk about the importance of healthy fats in the diet, and how you would recommend that people incorporate that daily?
Absolutely. I think if you are over 65 on this webinar, I think this is such an important conversation for you, because we are, thankfully, I think that we're inching out of this finally, but starting around late 70s into the 90s, even in the early 2000s, fat was demonized and everybody was on low fat this, low fat that. This fat was stripped from so many foods. And just a quick little history lesson for you. The reason the pendulum swung to this low fat craze for so long, that I think I can even remember it, and I'm probably on the lower end or the younger end of this that particular trend. But the reason it started happening was because in the couple decades before that, a lot of people who had been a lot of governors and people were dying of heart attacks. And they were trying to figure out what was going on. They were like, wait a minute, like this was in the 40s and 50s, lots of people started dying of heart attacks, and they were trying to figure out what happened or what was happening. And it was the advent of animal protein consumption and high saturated fat and trans fat consumption specifically. So instead of, at the time, differentiating between the fats, because now we know there is a spectrum of fats. We have monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, saturated fats, we have trans fats. There's a spectrum of types of fats. And they, instead of differentiating between all of them, they just said, fat is bad. Take it out. It's causing heart attacks. People are dying. Remove fat. It's terrible. So we did for many, many decades, and we started removing fat from our foods, and it was a huge thing, and people associated with eating fats with getting fat. Very, very untrue, super untrue. If you still have that lingering in your body anywhere, let it go. It's not true. Fats are so important, and the ones that we're trying to eat are monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. These are the most nutrient dense, beneficial. They carry so many vitamins and minerals, four main ones: vitamin D, A, E, and K. Super important for proper hormonal balance, health in general, immune health, you name it. But fats are really important. The ones that we don't want are saturated fats and trans fats. Saturated fats, there's always a little bit of a contentious debate there, because there's some, like coconut oil, for instance, is a saturated fat, but it's from a plant-based source. You talked about the seed oil stuff, so we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but you're supposed to limit your saturated fats, and you should have no trans fats whatsoever if you can avoid them as you can. And so one of the ways that we do that here is that we incorporate more nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds which are very high in monounsaturated fats, have been linked to greater and more beneficial heart health. This has been actually studied time and time again. This is almost a fact of life at this point, that more nuts and seed consumption is linked to better heart health. So that's actually why our L spread exists. And this is part of our daily longevity line, which I know when we talk to customers, everyone's like, this feels like such a random product that you have in your line. It's actually not. It's really delicious. It's like the most delicious probably of our product line, but it exists because you can get a couple servings of almonds in a very quick very quick way to increase your nut consumption every day to help assist your cardiovascular health. So it's actually there for our heart health patients. And also for patients that or customers who are trying to not douse their body with so much sugar when they're wanting to have something sweet. So that's another thing. But the types of fats are really important. I just felt really called to talk about that, because the low fat craze that we went through for several decades really caused a lot of mayhem in terms of what we're experiencing now with diabetes, obesity, and just our food supply in general is really a shadow effect from the low fat craze that we went through for a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think moving on from that, some people are asking just about the L spread and like what to use it for, how much to use it. I mean, is it something that you can include a lot? I know it comes in a jar. You could probably have like, I don't know, 10, 12, 15, 20 servings in it. So what is too much fat, and how does the L spread play into that?
I actually, do you know I think there's six, I want to say there's 6 servings total in one jar of L spread, I believe.
I have one
That
right
is,
here.
yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know it off the top of my head. We're looking for 4 to 6 servings of nuts and seeds a day is the recommendation for optimal heart health. And that's actually that particular ratio of 4 to 6 servings of nuts and seeds, which is basically a handful. And the reason, when you blend a nut, the handful becomes more of like a tablespoon rather than a handful. So you can explain the difference there, or understand the difference like that. But that has been linked to, I think, and also correct me on my stats, but I believe 60% reduction in heart-based or heart-related mortality in people who consistently do that over a long period of time. So this is a massive tool that we have in our toolbox, and the benefit, you guys, about nuts and seeds is that fats they take longer to break down in your body, so they keep you full for a lot longer. So incorporating more of those nuts and seeds will actually keep you full for a longer period of time, and you won't be craving those fast acting sugars, like things from quick carbohydrates, croissants, baked goods, whatever. You won't be craving those as much if you're really focused on including more of those healthy fats in your diet.
Absolutely. Okay, so We are going to transition into the final question before we really dig into questions. Believe it or not, we have a lot more to go. We want to talk a little bit about intermittent fasting that is longer than the 16 pattern, closer to 24, 36 hours. So a full day of fasting. How do you feel like that fits into our everyday longevity lifestyle?
Yeah. And before I answer that, I do want to just reiterate, because I think this is a good time. So we've gone off on a couple tangents. The longevity lifestyle, just to remind you guys, we're looking at it from a yearly perspective. Obviously, you're doing about 3 prolonged 5 days a year. And then you're going into your daily routine, which could include that time restricted eating pattern and what you're eating within that period of time, which could include things like the L protein, the L spread, all those longevity foods, and then what you're eating during the fasting side of that 24-hour cycle, which could include the fasting bars, fasting shakes, and so on. But your question, I think, is specifically targeted to the 5-2 method or the 6-1 method, where, if I'm already doing a prolonged fast a couple times a year, do I need to do, a shorter but longer intermittent fast here and there? And the answer is, it could be beneficial for you. And a lot of the people that I like to suggest this to are people who need a very quick reset, but aren't ready for that. You don't want to over fast. That's the other thing I want to mention. People who get really excited about the 5 day, like, can I do this every month? Can I do this, can I do this more than what you're saying? Because they feel so great afterwards. And that's amazing that you feel great, but you need to recuperate. It is still a fast. You still need to recuperate and regenerate and make sure that you're really re-nourishing your body. And it takes time to do that. So over fasting can be really problematic, and we're not recommending that. But doing a shorter fast, like the 1 day reset, for instance, could be a really quick way to get your body back into check without overdoing it when you're in between prolonged 5 day fasts. And I love this for people who travel a lot, because traveling can really mess up your system. A lot of us aren't eating as well when we're on the road. It's wonderful for people who maybe aren't quite ready to get to the 5 day fast, but need a little bit of a dip your toe in the water first for a couple weeks with the 1 day reset instead. That's a wonderful tool for you if you're really nervous about the 5 day fast. But yeah, it's really, it can be wonderful as a quick reset. And the reason we love ours is because it's a no-brainer. You don't have to think about anything. It's all in there. You still get, the wonderful benefits of the nutrition technology that we provide. And you feel great. You get into ketosis very quickly. And you feel great the next day. So yeah, I love the 1 day reset. It can be beneficial for a lot of people. It doesn't have to be something that you do all the time, but it can be part of a really healthy longevity lifestyle if you want it to be.
And Amber asks, how often should you do the 1 day reset?
We have people that do it 2-3 times a week sometimes when they're doing it. So you can technically do, a longer intermittent fast that way. I would say, if you're wanting to incorporate, if you want this to be part of a very regular cycle, doing it 1 day a week is pretty standard.
Mm-hmm. I want to just jump in with a question that hasn't yet been asked, but I get it all of the time.
You're gonna ask it.
Someone will ask it inevitably, because we sell the 1 day resets in packs of 3.
Yeah.
Whether you can do them consecutively or should do them consecutively to maybe reach a 3 day fast, especially as many of the viewers here will probably note that we often tout that autophagy really triggers around day 3 of a fast. And so, why not just do, an easier 3 1 day resets back to back? But unfortunately, we don't recommend that for a number of reasons, but primarily, I always like to remind people that the 1 day reset is very similar to day 1 of the 5 day fasting mimicking diet. but it doesn't look very similar to days 2 through 5. And so while it is very good to transition into a fast and to allow your body to gently enter into a fasted state, it really doesn't let you deeply sink into it. So 3 consecutive 1-day resets is not the same as the first 3 days of the 5-day fasting mimicking diet. So I think that's an important.
It's an incredibly important point, and also it's important to note that it is not a 1-for-1 comparison to the first day of the 5-day either. It's actually lower in calories too. So it's not to be replaced with the 5. It's a great point. I loved that you brought that up. But yeah, it can be wonderful for a quick reset on a weekly basis if you're needing that reset. And I don't know if anybody feels this way, but like my body feels it when I'm ready for my 5-day fast. So utilizing the 1-day reset here and there in between, in the months in between, can really help you to not get to the point of like, oh man, I'm really need my 5-day fast right now. It gives you a little bit of a boost in that way.
Beautiful. So we got a question from Deonda saying, will we be covering all pillars? Which I love this question because it sounds like we've covered a lot. We've covered the macronutrients. We've covered intermittent fasting of all the links. And we're really talking a lot about nutrition. And that really is really just one pillar of many pillars of the longevity lifestyle. So can you talk a little bit more about the other pillars that are part of the longevity lifestyle that we should be mindful of? We won't really sink our teeth into them today, but that are out there and that we'll probably be talking about in one of our upcoming webinars.
Yeah. Also, my favorite, weirdly, as a dietitian, the ancillary things are the things I really love to talk about. So some of the other pillars that are part of the longevity lifestyle or part of the longevity diet, what we've observed from people who live the longest are social connection, how important it is to have people in your community that you know, love, trust, feel comfortable with. This can be maybe your family. For a lot of people, it's other groups, other, friendship groups, community groups. But being part of a social community and in some capacity is massive. Having connection with your community, it cannot be underrated in any way, shape, or form. So social connection is one. Which is also why a lot of people who are older actually tend to do better in group living environments if they have had families that, maybe their family isn't around, or if, they've had death in their friend groups or whatever. Having people around you is really, really important. Another one is stress management. This is a really critical, actually, I would say that this actually, I don't know, is officially dubbed as a pillar, but I'm going to dub it as a pillar because that is so critical to what we're doing, how our lifestyles look right now. But stress management is massively important. People that are on the go all the time and are constantly in a surge or deficit of cortisol because they've been in such a surge for so long that they now aren't even creating cortisol anymore. This is really impactful from an inflammatory perspective on the body and the brain. And it causes a lot of long-term issues. So stress management is really important. And just, I think the way that they describe it in the longevity lifestyle book is people that take their days leisurely. People that go about their lives not in a rush, not rushing about, really taking your time, enjoying the present moment. That's a really, really critical component to the longevity lifestyle is stress management. Sleep is huge. I feel like about 15 years ago is when we really started to hear a lot about the importance of sleep. And we know this to be true because of how our synaptic brain works overnight. We need to actually clear all of these memories, these thoughts. We need to get our brain back on track overnight. And it also is when we fast. That's actually when we fast, you guys, is when we sleep. So it gives our body time to rest and repair and recuperate from a cellular level and a brain level. So we see lower incidences of cognitive decline in people that prioritize sleep and actually get good sleep. So that's another really critical component. And then the only other one that I'm thinking of, and I might be missing some, so Renee, I'm going to lob it back to you, but the other last one that I'll throw out is sense of purpose. And having something that you truly live for. And for some people, that's their pet or their family. It could be a lot of people, we see a lot of older people who don't want to stop working, and it actually helps them to live a longer life because they have the sense of purpose, or maybe your sense of purpose is within your community. But sense of purpose is a really, really critical component too. And just having something to wake up for in the morning and to feel like you are contributing to the world and society you live in is a really underrated and important component to the longevity lifestyle too. Did I miss any?
You did. You missed
Tell,
one.
tell me
It's
the other one.
physical exercise.
Oh God. Get out
I
and
know, I'm
move.
sorry.
Get out
You
and move.
almost
Yeah. You were like, there she's gonna. I just feel like that's a given these days. Yes, moving your body. But the important part about physical exercise within the longevity lifestyle and the longevity world is actually not. It's a little bit different than what we know about. Hey, I'm scheduling a workout for an hour, and that's going to be my physical activity. In longevity zones, people are moving their bodies all day long in terms of walking, gardening. They're active. They're on their feet. They're doing things. It's not necessarily, doesn't look like a Barry's boot camp HIIT class. It looks like I'm walking to the grocery store and I'm walking back from the grocery store, and I'm going outside and I'm tending to my plants. And they're just more physically mobile than we are today with our computers and our digital society. So I think it's really important to call that out, because we're not talking about you going to the gym and lifting, although weightlifting is actually very helpful for maintaining lean body tissue, but it's not about you going to the gym more and lifting heavier weights. It's actually you just getting up and moving your body more from a day-to-day perspective, and not driving as much, and maybe grabbing your bike or taking a walk instead of driving. So that's another obviously really important key here.
Beautiful. Okay, so we only have about 7 minutes left. So I'm going to try and just get through as many questions as we possibly can. So on the topic of physical exercise that we just touched on, is an anonymous attendee asks to touch on working out while fasting, and ideally, more specifically, why it is recommended not to work out while fasting, because it is so important to them and to their routine not to break their physical exercise routine. So
yeah,
can you touch on that?
It's a great question. I think this is and I'm gonna guess that this is probably a little bit more towards the 5-day, and why we recommend not doing it during the 5-day fast. And here's the simple answer. The reason that we hope you're doing the 5-day prolonged fast is to really get deep into cellular rejuvenation and autophagy. When we work out and do a really intense workout during the 5-day fast, your body will be sidetracked to deal with the inflammation that your muscles just endured, instead of a whole body cellular rejuvenation. So we suggest, it's not that you can't move your body in a light way. Yoga, walking, stretching, actually those things are really helpful to move the lactic acid that might be accumulating on a fast from stuff moving out of your body. It's actually really helpful. But when you do really intense physical activity on our 5-day fast, it's kind of detracting you from why you did it, why you began. And we want your cells to have undivided attention to really get through that autophagy and to really feel better. And if you think about the fact that physical activity is a slight form of good inflammation, but it's still inflammation, and we're you are already igniting your immune system when you follow our 5-day fast. We don't want you to overdo it. We really want you to focus on that cellular repair. And so we like to treat it as a break in general. And it's also a break from things like, voluntary supplementation. Your body having a reset from everything that you safely can stay away from for 5 days is really actually helpful every now and again to give your body a full break. So that's the main reason why we suggest avoiding physical exercise during the 5-day.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so let's dig into, we have a lot of questions around the 5-day, which we can answer absolutely.
Sure.
But I think what we'll do is do another webinar that is a little bit more focused also on the 5-day FMD too, because there's so many great questions coming out about that. Okay, so KK asks, if we're using a 12-12-12 pattern, do you eat at any time or constantly during that window? What
Great
does it
question.
look like eating in a 12-12 window?
Great question. If you are maintaining your body weight, or if you are looking, I think it's important to understand what your goals are. Because within a 12-12, you can still lose weight by calorically restricting within that 12-12 pattern. But if you're maintaining your weight, that looks like 3 meals a day and a snack. Basically. So if that would mean breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack, either in between one of those meals, that's what a 12-12 would be. Eating small, regular meals is actually not as beneficial for gut health and metabolism as keeping your meals in very siloed sections. And the reason for that, especially as you're aging, we're not producing as much hydrochloric acid as we age, which is an essential digestive juice that our stomach creates to churn our food. And if we're just kind of dripping food throughout the day, our body doesn't have a chance to really rev up that HCl and other digestive juices, and we're not digesting as well. So you might actually find that you're more bloated, have a little gassier, maybe a little bit more constipated when you do like small meals every 2 hours. So we do suggest full breakfast, full lunch, full dinner, and one snack within that 12-12 pattern. If you're trying to lose weight, I'll mention again, we suggest that you do 2 meals and a snack instead to calorically restrict within that 12-12 pattern. So that would be breakfast, definitely breakfast. And you can choose between lunch or dinner and then a snack on the meal that you're not consuming food. And then once you hit your weight goals, you go back to the 12-12 pattern where you're eating 3 meals a day.
Awesome. KK asks if you can give an example of what you would eat for breakfast on a longevity diet.
Ooh, that's a good
Yeah,
one.
fun one.
Ooh, I'm on the spot now. I would say, so one thing to be really mindful of is that carbohydrates on an empty stomach first thing in the morning isn't always the best. So my suggestion would be to focus on including healthy fats and healthy proteins or plant-based proteins in addition to some carbohydrates first thing in the morning. So that could look like potentially avocado toast with a couple eggs if you are eating eggs. Or it could be, I like to make like a version of hummus, but a little chunky, like a chunky hummus. And I put that on some toast with a side of avocado and maybe like, a vegetable or something like that. So it could be a variety of things. I think the most important part is to consider not focusing just on carbohydrates. Making sure you have healthy fats and proteins at your breakfast is going to be really critical to help elongate how long you can go in between breakfast and lunch, and also to make sure that you're getting all your macronutrients. Renee, you're a fabulous cook. Yeah, you can throw out one. You're a fabulous cook. Tell us what you would make.
Well, I'm going to throw in my easy breakfast that I make, which is with the berry L protein and then an avocado just to throw in a little extra healthy fats. I use a plant-based milk. I throw in a big handful of spinach or kale or some leafy greens to get in some greens in there. And then I've got healthy fats, proteins, some veggies, and oftentimes I'll throw in like some seeds, like maybe some hemp seeds, something like that in there too. And it just makes, a great smoothie. And you can play around with that and make all sorts of fun stuff with that too. So
the avocado makes it so thick and frothy. Yum. Yum.
I usually do it. Oh, I forgot to mention a frozen banana is like I usually do a half of a frozen banana, not a full. Just again, not just keeping it especially sweet, but not too sweet. Oh, it's so good, and it adds like the good texture too. Great. So Sam asks, how soon after you wake up should you eat breakfast?
That's another really wonderful, man, such good questions, you guys. I would say, but within an hour or two of waking up. And the reason for that, ideally an hour, but that's kind of unrealistic for some people. But I usually give the little 2-hour buffer. But the reason for that is because that's when our cortisol is spiking. And when our body is starting to rev up, it indicates to our body that we are hormonally active. Our day is beginning. So within about an hour or two of waking up is ideal and optimal.
Awesome.
And ideally,
Okay.
you're not waking up at noon. Hopefully that means you're waking up within, because circadian pattern is also working with the sun, right? So if you are working within that pattern, that means that you're also focused on, you're waking up between 6 and 8, right? Ish. And you're focusing, you're eating with the sunshine. And which is important too, because we're in fall now, which means we don't get as much sunshine. So if you can wake up with the sun and eat with the sun, that's a even better way to support your body during fall.
Great. I'm going to take two more questions. One is going to be, what about eggs and fish and some of the technically animal proteins? How should you incorporate them? Should you incorporate them? How do those fit into the protein recommendations?
Fish is a huge part of the longevity diet. Well, huge part. It is a component to the longevity diet. And for that reason, we include a couple servings of fish a week in the longevity diet to help assist with omega-3 fatty acid consumption, to also with B12. We need B12 is notoriously deficient in vegan vegetarian diets. So it's helpful to really fill in some of those holes that maybe a complete plant-based diet would avoid. How do you feel about eggs, Renee?
I will include them as needed, depending on how I feel. I am a big believer in listening to your body and listening to what you need at that time, but do limit them because they are still an animal-based protein and they absolutely still will trigger mTOR and IGF-1, those pro-growth pathways. So yes, they are limited, but and oftentimes I try and keep it to 1-2 times a week. That is my personal preference, but I do know that the longevity lifestyle does also suggest to limit as much as possible, especially if you're frying them, etc. So yeah, that's my
just think of your animal proteins as I like to talk to my patients and customers about animal proteins being a supplement to your weekly diet. So it doesn't need to be an everyday thing. It's something that you include a couple times a week if you are going to. It shouldn't be the main component of your dish. It is supposed to be a complement to an otherwise plant-based diet.
And I do want to note for any of our vegans and vegetarians out there, if you aren't having fish, that is totally okay too. Just make sure to be mindful of ensuring you're getting enough omega-3s and enough B12 from those plant-based sources, which there absolutely are some of those. B12, usually you have to supplement, but that's okay too. Just make sure that you're being mindful of those and being a really well-planned vegan and vegetarian diet.
And nuts and seeds have lots of good omega-3s too. So keep eating your nuts and seeds.
Beautiful. Okay, and then the last question that I'm taking is, can you cover the nutrients that especially kick you out of a fast?
Oh, it's not, well, I would say it's the quantity that we specifically track, the quantity and the ratios of them that we track here. So I would say it's not necessarily which nutrients, because technically there's 3 main ones we talked about: proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and they all can kick you out of a fast if you eat too much of them, or and actually we need to feed. We need the nutrients we can't be in a fast all the time. That's not healthy either, as I mentioned before. So it's really the quantity, but I would say that some of the there is a good form of all of those macronutrients, and then there are lesser great forms of those macronutrients that we also try to avoid. So things like simple sugars aren't recommended. So things like table sugar, cane sugar, high fructose corn syrup, we don't recommend from the carbohydrate side. We don't recommend as much saturated and trans fats from the fat side of things. And then we also don't recommend excessive animal proteins either. So I think it's about the quantity more so than anything that will kick you out of the fast. But also remembering that there's 2 sides to every coin, and not all of your macronutrients are or should be created equal.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, we are already over time, so we're going to have to say goodbye, but I got a lot of questions just funneling in about whether or not this recording will be available. It most certainly will be. We will be sending it out to everybody that has registered for the webinar after the webinar. So In the future, if you ever can't make a webinar, make sure to register, because we will always make sure to send it to anybody who has registered for it. Now, anything else that you want to add, Melanie, before we say goodbye?
Two things. Go to Prolon Life, check out our other non 5-day products. I think you guys, if you haven't tried them, try them. They're incredible. And truly do all play a unique role in the longevity lifestyle that we've developed here. And also, for those of you, I'm going to give you a sneak peek that we do have our longevity lifestyle ebook that is going to be coming out in a couple weeks. So we will be sending you, because you've registered for this fast, we're giving it to you first. It's not quite done yet. We're in the throes of making it beautiful for you right now, but it will be available very soon. So we're hoping to share that with you guys first. And that way you can have everything that we've talked about here in a wonderful, beautiful, easy to digest book, pun intended.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Melanie. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for the thank yous in the chat. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of your incredible questions. Thank you for being engaged. We cannot tell you how grateful we are on our end to get to be here, to get to spend this hour with you and get to share some of the things that we so deeply care about. So have a fantastic evening, everyone. We will continue to do these every single month, and we will see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Talk
Thank
soon.
you. Bye.